Good evening, everyone. We've got a big hour ahead, including disturbing new details about Donald Trump's perverse worldview. I mean, what can you say about a man who reportedly told his chief of staff Hitler did a lot of good things? Plus, a Republican congressman openly admits it. He wants nothing but chaos for the next 18 months. Anything to keep President Biden from notching any victories. And in a little while, I'll speak with Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg as President Biden makes his big push for his agenda in a conservative district. But we begin the readout tonight with the insidious underbelly of the GQP culture war. Right now, in this summer before the next round of elections, Democrats across the country are preparing to run as they would normally run. But whether they realize it or not, they are running headlong into a cultural wood chipper because Republicans aren't running an election. They're waging an all-out war for power that increasingly is based on and steeped in the Trump cult and even white nationalism. And no matter how reckless and dangerous that is, they're doing it believing it will move white voters. Look no further than the ongoing hysteria over race-conscious education, what they are shamelessly and falsely misrepresenting as critical race theory. Radicalized parent activists across the country are targeting school boards with behind-the-scenes help from conservative groups. Protesters are swarming those meetings, vowing to revolt against a curriculum they've labeled unacceptable and reverse racist. And leading the charge in this fight is, you guessed it, right-wing media. Yesterday, Fox News mentioned critical race theory more than 100 times before 2 p.m., I should say. And then there's Fox's fear-mongering standard bearer, Tuckums, who went full 1984, denouncing what he called the greatest threat to our society.
It's civilization-ending poison. But it's everywhere. How widespread is it? Well, we can't really be sure until we finally get cameras in the classroom as we put them on the chests of police officers.
Civilization-ending poison. Okay, the common denominator is an attempt to reverse something Joe Biden pulled off last year. According to Pew Research Center analysis, in addition to overwhelmingly winning voters of color, Biden ate into the ex-president's support among white voters, particularly white suburban voters, reducing Trump's 2016 margin by 12%. So the goal now is to terrify those white voters into voting for a party that is offering nothing on policy. Zip, zero, nothing. By zeroing in on the amygdala of white suburbanites and scaring the hell out of them. That black Americans are conspiring to pollute their precious children's minds with dangerous knowledge and then turn them into woke future Democrats. And in the wake of the disgraced, twice impeached president's defeat, that hysteria over the perceived encroachment of race-conscious education is being exploited by another insidious force, followers of QAnon, who are now using the battle cry to similarly target school boards, with many who have espoused QAnon's theories now melding their own conspiracies with the lies about critical race theory. With me now is NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins. Ben, please explain this nexus now between this fake version of critical race theory that is freaking people out at school boards and QAnon.
Yeah, sure. So the last year, people have presented basically a laundry list to try to get people on school boards, off school boards. And, you know, at the very beginning of last year, it was about masks generally, mask mandates, getting people riled up about the fact they can't get their kids back to school, or once their kids are back in school, they're going to be wearing masks. And a lot of them were using junk science they found, on Facebook or whatever. And, that had legs for a long time. But then in, the last 3 or 4 months, critical race theory is at this. And a lot of the people who were there for mask stuff then got their, they just added something to it. They added critical race theory stuff to it as well. They were like, hey, if we can get this person off a school board, get one of our own onto this school board, it doesn't really matter to me if we're adding another talk about race to this thing. We really just want the masks over with. And that happens, by the way, vice versa. Some people are there to talk about critical race theory, and then they end up really angry about masks. And what we've seen recently is QAnon followers as well going to these meetings, seeing this big public spectacle. Some of these things are on YouTube, so they can go up there and give these big speeches about the cabal or something. And they can say, hey, we need to rile people up. We need to get people ready to take over these school boards over the next year. They'll post that, by the way, on their Instagram later on. But that's the point. They are using Michael Flynn's rallying cry to take over the school boards, run for school board, run for public office, he said. He said, we need to get involved in the education of our children. And right now, on the top of the biggest QAnon message board that's what you'll see. You'll see that quote from Mike Flynn saying, run for school board.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is that sort of the through line here is to say that essentially white America's children are being polluted, their minds, their bodies, by the woke mob, by the left, by the multicultural party, and that's a threat. It sounds very much like the Reconstruction era when like the black and tan Republicans were a threat because they were this multiracial coalition that was polluting the minds and bodies of white women and children. It's very 1860s. There's this other headline that we have now that the FBI actually managed to, I guess, sort of infiltrate this Bible study group that then became a cover for violent militia plans. Here's the story. Northern Virginia's Lee Duong is accused of building up a supply of explosive. He and others held Bible studies where they discussed firearms and other training. The FBI infiltrated his militia after he interacted with undercover police on January 6th. And at the time of his arrest, he'd several guns and materials to make 50 Molotov cocktails. Apparently, he had an AK-47. Can you talk about the nexus here with evangelical Christians? Because that seems to be the target group for both QAnon and for these other militias types.
Yeah, specifically with QAnon. People find QAnon because they are, they're tied up in specific things like Bible groups, maybe, and they move over from there. And by the way, they borrow nomenclature. For example, the Great Awakening, which is the big QAnon thing. That's what a lot of QAnon people thought January 6th was, right? Where everyone would wake up to the fact that there was this cabal of elites and all this stuff. That's not just a QAnon phrase. That's from evangelical Christianity over the last 20, 30 years. They work symbiotically. That doesn't mean evangelical Christians are QAnon people at all. But it does mean that QAnon people use the cloak of evangelical Christianity as a way to try to, mask this as a benevolent movement. But it's effectively a terror movement.
Not even effectively. I mean, according to FBI Director Christopher Wray, it is a domestic terrorist movement, and they are recruiting and radicalizing people, and people need to wake up to it. Ben Collins, always on top of this. Thank you very much. Okay, so joining in on the anti-critical race theory nonsense is Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, of course, who tweeted that critical race theories reverse racism and spits on the civil rights movement, all while invoking, as they like to do, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., falsely. Now, that would be the same Rand Paul who single-handedly blocked the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill last summer. Also conveniently, the same Rand Paul who back in 2010 demurred when asked if he would have voted for the 1964 Civil Rights Act, when he was asked that by the Louisville Courier-Journal. He then expanded on his views in an interview with our own Rachel Maddow.
How about desegregating lunch counters? Lunch counters?
Well, what it gets into is that then if you decide that restaurants are publicly owned and not privately owned, does the owner of the restaurant own his restaurant, or does the government own his restaurant? These are important philosophical debates, but not a very practical discussion.
Joining me now is Democrat Charles Booker, who's running to replace Rand Paul in the United States Senate. And Charles, the only thing I find surprising about Rand Paul inserting himself from his national purview into local issues about what's taught in schools, the only difference between him and in 2010 is that they're just open about it, right? He was open about it in 2010, saying, I wouldn't have voted for the 64 Civil Rights Act. I think people should be able to tell black people you can't eat here. But now it's like that is the Republican Party. Now they've all joined in. What do you make of this?
Well, Joy, you're right. Basically, what they're doing now, they're putting down the dog whistle and they're picking up a megaphone. They're saying the quiet parts out loud. And essentially what Rand Paul is doing right now, he's making a bet. He believes that racism is a winning strategy and it's how he intends to keep his seat, but he's not. And he won't, because we see through this BS. This is a tired old playbook. This is the Southern strategy. This is the Willie Horton ad. This is weaponizing hate. This is exploiting fears. And I'm going to tell you right now, the people of Kentucky are fed up with this BS. We're fighting to survive here, to put food on our table, to afford our medication, and push for policies like Medicare for All to make sure that we have a sustainable future. And this clown is stoking racial fears and hatred.
I mean, the thing is, when Rachel Maddow interviewed him in 2010, he really couldn't just come down and say restaurants should not be able to discriminate against people because they're black. He tried to do all these analogies. Well, what if you say you don't want guns in your restaurant? As if somebody coming in with a gun who could kill people is the same as a black person coming in to have a pie, right? So that's Rand Paul's strategy. But to me, it feels very much like we're in the Reconstruction era again, right? The idea is that Republicans are saying that white children's minds and bodies are being attacked by black people that want to steal their history and make them ashamed of being white. And they want to, make them vulnerable to this cabal of Satan-worshiping pedophiles. It's very Reconstruction era. How the hell do you beat someone in a state that only has 7% African Americans? You're going to have to win white voters in order to win. Charles, how do you do that when they're being hit with this every day?
Well, first of all, what you just said is why we need to know our history, because it repeats itself. And the way that we win in the face of this hate is to make the point clear. For me, this is not about just beating Rand Paul. This is about beating hate. It's about pulling up the roots of racism. And we do it by actually listening to the people. I'll tell you, when I sit down with miners in Eastern Kentucky, when I sit down with those small family farmers, when I sit down with young people that are fighting to address the climate crisis, or families that are marching in the streets because they're crying out for justice, they are demanding leadership. They're demanding change. And the common bonds that we share across Kentucky and across this country, they're not partisan. Rationing your insulin, that's not partisan. Keeping food on your table, that's not partisan. We need leaders that can call out this hate and this racism and this bigotry for what it is, but disarm it by saying, look, whenever someone like Rand Paul talks about defunding the police or critical race theory or reparations, it's not because he cares about solutions. It's because he wants to distract the people from the challenges we're facing and distract from the fact that he is doing nothing for us, that the government isn't working for us. He voted against, with Mitch McConnell, the Grim Reaper, voted against added relief and infrastructure support that would help create jobs, voted against the COVID relief package, voted to block any effort for us to protect our access to the ballot box. They do not care whether we live or die, and they want to stoke racism to keep us.
Oh, I think
I'm at and go to charlesbooker.org so that we can win our future together.
Okay, hopefully I have one more question, so hopefully your Zoom will hold up. Your Wi-Fi needs to hold it for like 2 more seconds. Because, the other senator from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, he's now openly bragging to his donors, I guess, or whoever was his audience. I didn't vote to give you any money. You're going to get some money, but you didn't get it from me, and you're not going to get any more. And he got reelected on a message of, I'm giving you nothing. And now Rand Paul is saying, not only am I giving you nothing, but I think you're so racist that all I have to do is say black people bad and you'll vote for me. If that is what they think of the constituency in your state, I have to ask you again, what is the counter message that you think beats that?
It is the most offensive, the most disrespectful. It is a slap in the face for these politicians like Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul to say that all we deserve is hatred. All we deserve is to be mocked. All we deserve is this racist playbook that is having us fight amongst ourselves. We beat that by speaking the truth and by organizing on that, by lifting up the challenges real Kentuckians are facing and calling out the fact that we can build a brighter future together. And I'm going to tell you right now, the people of Kentucky want change. They're demanding it. Folks that voted for Trump, folks that never voted before, people in Appalachia, folks in Western Kentucky, folks in the hood where I'm from, we want real change. We just need leaders that will finally be accountable to us. And there's a reason that you're seeing this bipartisan coalition behind me early. In our first 24 hours, we raised over $1 million. We're seeing support coming all over Kentucky because we're ready to win in this moment, and we will.
Yeah. When you've got the Senate minority leader who's been the majority leader and he's from your state and your state's still poor, you might need to vote differently. That's all I'm going to say. Charles Booker, good luck to you. Thank you very much. Okay, up next on the readout. Republicans say the quiet part out loud. They want chaos, not legislation that actually helps anybody, so they can have more power. Plus, President Biden makes his case for human infrastructure, the critically important investments that go beyond roads and bridges, like childcare and education. Mitch McConnell, well, he thinks that's a waste of time and money. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg joins me on that. Plus, okay, as New York celebrates the heroes of the pandemic, tonight's absolute worst continue to spread lies about the vaccine, while COVID deaths are now almost exclusively among the unvaccinated. The readout continues after this. You don't have to work in politics to know that there are certain things you just don't say out loud. I don't know, praising Hitler, por ejemplo. But don't tell that to America's own tiny-fingered Mussolini. The Guardian reports that according to a new book by Michael Bender, Donald Trump told his chief of staff, John Kelly, in 2018 that Hitler did a lot of good things. According to the book, the remark stunned Kelly. But while Kelly reportedly told the president that he was wrong, Trump was reportedly undeterred. Trump's reported defense of Hitler would be surprising if it wasn't Trump, whose ex-wife Ivana reportedly told her lawyer that he kept a copy of Hitler's speeches in a bedroom drawer for pleasure reading. But it also fits a pattern that we've seen from Republicans lately of basically screaming the quiet parts out loud. For instance, in a video released just today, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona described Democrats the way Trump used to describe the media, as enemies of the state.
We hear an awful lot about the Democrat Party moving to the left, practicing socialism, Marxism, Leninism, communism, whatever. You're in the House. What do the Democrat House members actually believe?
My own opinion is that they are enemies of the state.
The state of what? State of Trump? The congressman's office has not responded to requests for comment, unsurprisingly. That video was captured by Lauren Windsor, the executive producer of The Undercurrent, who's gained some notoriety for her undercover work exposing Republicans and what they actually believe. Another of her videos captures Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, seeming to admit that the goal of the Republican Party right now is to obstruct all legislation and create an atmosphere of chaos ahead of the midterm elections.
Honestly, right now, for the next 18 months, our job is to do everything we can to slow all of that down to get to December 2022. I actually say, thank you, Lord, 18 more months of chaos and the inability to get stuff done. That's what we want.
Well, we've reached out to Roy's office to confirm that it's his voice in that video, but we've not heard back. However, Roy did respond to the video on Twitter and notably didn't deny it was him. In fact, he embraced it, calling himself an exceptional obstructionist. And with me now is Lauren Windsor, executive producer of The Undercurrent and Project Veritas Exposed, and Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large at The Bulwark and an MSNBC columnist. And I'll start with you, Lauren. Congratulations on all of this great video. Let's talk about that. When you're in these settings, how are you? Are you surprised at how open people like Andy Biggs and Chip Roy are at just saying their strategy?
And frankly, no. I've been doing this for a while, and in these settings, I feel pretty comfortable just openly saying it.
And let's
to the average person.
Yeah, I think so. Let's go through them one by one. So Andy Biggs, the enemies of the state thing. I mean, this is a guy who essentially is an insurrectionist, right? So what did he get into more detail about who does he see as the state? Because at the moment, the state, if you want to call it that, is controlled by Democrats.
Well, he actually went on in that clip. He went on in that clip to name 3 House members that he considered to be radical leftists, and they included Jerry Nadler, Carolyn Maloney, and Maxine Waters. And so I just, I think the average person doesn't really see Jerry Nadler or Carolyn Maloney as a radical leftist. But I know that Maxine Waters is a favorite boogeyman for the right. So that one was a little bit more, I think, expected, but definitely not for Jerry Nadler.
Yeah. Charlie, I think we need a new name. The squad is already taken, but Nadler, Maloney, and Maxine Waters, Squad 2.0, maybe? I mean, when you hear this.
The triad.
The triad. So that's it. That's what it's going to be. The triad. Nadler, fearsome fellow, man. I know he frightens me. What do you make of this? The openness of just admitting these people he sees, Jerry Nadler, enemy of the state. Interesting that he picks women and Jewish people and black people as the enemies of the state. I'm not going to say that's not a coincidence. And then Chip Roy essentially admitting, look, all we want is chaos. That's how we win. Pure chaos.
I have to say that I find these comments completely unsurprising. Chip Roy is articulating what all of us have known has been the Republican position, that they no longer are actually interested in governing or passing anything. In fact, the whole, owning the libs, trolling style of politics is about chaos. It's about obstructionism. And quite frankly, Republicans are completely comfortable with all of this. And, this plays well with the base. We may sit here and think it's a gaffe, like, oh, my gosh, look what they're saying in private. And they're looking at each other and going, yeah, this is what we say. This is what we were going to run on because this is who we are. They have become completely reactionary here. And it is rather extraordinary that Chip Roy in particular, if I'm correct about this, was talking about obstructing infrastructure bill, which like 5 minutes ago would have been a bipartisan thing. If he'd been on the condo board, he would have been the guy saying, no, we don't need to spend any money to fix anything here. Let's simply argue about it and then claim that somehow that was being conservative. And that may seem tasteless, but the reality is that there are real consequences to the refusal to do things that are necessary or even attempt to. And I think that's what he's saying. Is that we're not even going to attempt to. We're not going to look for a better bill. We're not going to propose an alternative. We just want to block everything and be obstructionist. And he's completely comfortable with that.
Well, they're getting that also from their leader, Lauren. Let me talk a little bit about that. So Chip Roy, in this conversation, because, you do have the head of the United States, Republicans in the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell, saying the same thing. Hey, congratulations, Kentucky, on getting this money. You ain't getting none from me. And they're essentially telegraphing to their audiences, look, we're going to give you nothing. No bridges, no roads, no potholes filled. We're giving you nothing, but we also think that y'all are so racist that you're going to guard your precious white children from getting any knowledge about history because then that will destroy them. We think that knowledge will destroy them. They'll turn them woke. They don't get to learn anything. They will be ignorant and have no bridges. Were they being open about that? Did he elaborate on why they get no infrastructure and why they should be happy about that?
So in terms of fighting the infrastructure bill, he was very clear that he wants to obstruct anything. And, that really toes the line with Mitch McConnell is, for the next 18 months, we're going to slow walk this entire process until the 2022 midterm elections. And then, if they can retake the Senate or retake the House, then we'll have another 2 years of obstructing everything as well because,
doing nothing.
Biden won't get anything done in the second half. So is that really what the American people want? Is 4 years of just total gridlock? It's insane.
And race entertainment, because that is what they are giving. Let me play another of your clips. This is Congressman Youngkin, and he's talking, I guess, about something very similar. And let's listen to that. This is Glenn Youngkin. He is actually a candidate for Virginia governor.
Can we keep on playing? Do we take did it to the abortionist stuff?
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest with you. The short answer is, in this campaign, I can't. When I'm governor and I have a majority in the House, we can start going on offense. But as a campaign topic, sadly, that in fact won't win my independent votes that I have to get.
For those who didn't hear, he said that he's going to take a hard line on abortion, but he can't say it out loud because he has to get independent votes. Lauren, that sounds to me like he's essentially saying, I got to lie in order to get independence.
Yes. I mean, he was very clear about I cannot win this campaign by being upfront about my views on abortion. In other footage that wasn't in that segment, pressed him on, would you get us a fetal heartbeat bill? Would you defund Planned Parenthood? And, he was like, you're on the right track. Those are all great things, but I can't say that in public because I'll never win the independent voters that I need to win this race. But when I am in the governor's mansion and I have a House majority, then we can go on the offense.
Yeah.
He said all these things.
People should know if you're a voter in Virginia, that is his plan if he gets in office, is to ban abortion. His spokesperson said that the audio demonstrated that Glenn Youngkin says the same things no matter who he's talking to. We're running out of time, but we also have Congressman Mike Johnson. You guys can watch this on Twitter, essentially saying that he's went to high school with Amy Coney Barrett and he knows that she will overturn abortion. Before we go, we are out of time, but Charlie Sykes, shocked or not shocked that Donald Trump praised Hitler? Make that really short, but shocked or not shocked?
No, not shocked at all. But again, disillusioned that the General Kelly did not share this with the voters before the election because he saw this up close and personal. And as a patriot, he should have spoken out about that, knowing what he knew.
I am not surprised that Kelly did, and I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not surprised that he said nothing. Not surprised. Sorry, lack of character showed before that. Lara Windsor, Charlie Sykes, thank you both very much. Still ahead, the perpetual fount of hypocrisy and delicious irony, known as Addison Mitch McConnell, is at it again. Listen to what he had to say about President Biden's infrastructure plan.
The era of bipartisanship on this stuff is over.
Wait, hang on. There was an era of bipartisanship on this stuff, and I missed it? Is it over already? Jesus, be a bridge. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is with us here in the real world next. Stay with us. President Biden was in Crystal Lake, Illinois today, one of the redder parts of the blue state, as he continued to sell his infrastructure plan. He made the case for the American Families Plan, which is expected to pass via reconciliation.
To truly win the 21st century and once again lead the world, to truly build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, to truly deal everybody in this time, we need to invest in our people. That's why I want to guarantee an additional 4 years of public education for every person in America, starting with providing 2 years of universal, high-quality preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds. We'll also make strategic investments in teachers. High-quality child care options should be the rule, not the exception. So I'm going to be making the case to the American people until the job is done.
While Biden is working hard to convince the working class, failed by Republican policies, that he can help, Republicans are doing everything they can to stop him. They've called the proposals in the American Family Plan garbage. But don't take my word for it. Check out what the Grim Reaper of legislation, Mitch McConnell, told a bunch of supporters in Kentucky.
And my friends, this is not going to be done on a bipartisan basis. This is going to be a hell of a fight over what this country ought to look like in the future. And it's all going to unfold here in the next few weeks. But we're going to make it hard for them.
This came after he boasted about refusing to support the wildly popular American Relief Package.
Not a single member of my party voted for it. So you're going to get a lot more money. I didn't vote for it. But you're going to get a lot more money. Do it wisely, because hopefully this windfall doesn't come along again.
Joining me now, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. And I laugh a little bit, Secretary Pete, because you've been a politician. I never knew that a selling point with voters could be, you got all that money, I didn't give it to you, and you ain't going to get any more. I had no idea that was a winning political message until today. I'm today old. Does that surprise you, just as a former politician?
You know, I guess it's not my place to give political advice to members of the Senate from the other party, but I am puzzled by it, because what we're trying to do is wildly popular. I mean, that's true certainly of the rescue plan, which did so much to bring us back from the brink. It's certainly true of the bipartisan infrastructure framework, which we continue to believe can and should move forward with bipartisan support, getting us everything from roads and bridges to fixing lead pipes to internet, but also the things the president was talking about today, making sure you can have 12 weeks of paid family leave if you need it, making sure everybody gets 3- and 4-year-olds can get pre-kindergarten education, community college, making childcare more affordable. I mean, these are things that the American people want. Matter of fact, most Republicans around the country want them. I don't know why you would stake your ground on fighting things that the American people correctly believe are long overdue. And that's what the president believes, too.
Well, I mean, you know, Mitch McConnell didn't just do that. He called it garbage. And just to go over it again, a child tax credit, child care, universal pre-K, as you just mentioned, free community college, Pell Grants, workforce development, paid family leave. Like, these are things that when you say it to regular people, they go, oh, that sounds great. So my question to you guys, just strategically, if these things are popular and doing infrastructure, roads and bridges, you're the trains guy, that's popular. Why separate them? Why not just put them all back into one bill, pass the whole thing through reconciliation, and tell Republicans vote for it or don't, but we're not going to carry you?
Well, it's important to the president to do what we can on a bipartisan basis. By the way, it's also important to a lot of members of the Senate Democratic Caucus to do what we can on a bipartisan basis. And there's a lot that we can. I mean, let's be clear. This bipartisan infrastructure framework, I mean, we're talking about the biggest investment in public transit in American history. We're talking about the biggest investment in roads and bridges since Eisenhower, the most we've ever done on a number of environmental cleanup issues. But, you know, during that run-up on the infrastructure deal, right, we heard a lot from the other side of the aisle saying, okay, you know, these things you want to do to make childcare more affordable or help people with elder care, you know, that's all well and good. We just don't think it should be in the infrastructure package. Fine. Now this will call the question because it's in a different package. Maybe they'll be for it, maybe they won't. But the American people are for it, and we think both of these packages will pass. Both of them deserve to get to the president's desk for a signature, and when he signs them, American lives are going to be better. People are going to be better off, not only when we have better roads and bridges and airports and the rest of it, but when we have childcare affordable for everybody, when we have that paid family leave. People are going to feel the differences in their lives right away. That is good policy. I got to think it's good politics, too, but I guess everybody makes their own decision on that.
Do you trust Joe Manchin and really especially Kristen Sinema to not double cross you all? Vote for the, sort of watered down a bit because you have to get Republicans in it, infrastructure bill, and then refuse to vote for the reconciliation bill. Do you trust them not to double cross you?
I've heard them talk about some of these same issues that are in this families package as well. I know that they're interested in this. I've heard each of them talk about the need to move the country forward on that front. So we need to obviously shape legislation that can get all the votes it needs to pass. One of the challenges with a 50-50 Senate is literally any single one senator can make or break any one piece of legislation. But that's a challenge that we accept, that we welcome, and the president's already done what a lot of people didn't think was possible, negotiating a bipartisan deal, and a big one. I mean, let's be clear. Again, this bipartisan infrastructure framework represents the biggest investment we have seen in generations in American infrastructure. In many ways, on many subjects, the biggest investment in American history. But we know we've got to do more, and if we have to do that part without Republican votes, so be it. I still haven't given up on the idea, though, that at least some Senate Republicans might decide to agree with the American people, including, by the way, a large majority of American Republicans, maybe not here on Capitol Hill, but out there around the country, who have said that they, too, believe we need to invest more in the care economy of this country.
I don't doubt that there are regular rank-and-file Republicans in the world who are just sort of old-fashioned tax cut Republicans that are not radicalized. But the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. is fully radicalized. They're operating essentially a cult of Donald Trump. And they are pushing things that are very needling right up on white nationalism. So I have to ask you this again, just as somebody who's been in politics. Has anyone in, let's say, your city, back when you were a mayor, ever said, I only want this pothole filled if it's bipartisan? Isn't this whole bipartisanship sort of obsession a beltway obsession? Because average Americans just want the stuff. They just want the benefits and the assistance, right? Yeah. Have you ever heard of anyone saying, I demand that it be bipartisan, or just that I just want it?
No, I mean, look, when I was mayor, of course, I was always happy to get Republican and Democratic votes for my agenda when I could. But you're right.
Probably weren't white nationalist radicals, though,
whether we solve the problem or not.
Yeah. But I mean, if
people want to know if we're going to deliver. Yeah. That's it. They want to know if we're going to deliver.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, we can agree on that.
And by the way, we are. I mean, think about how everybody will feel the difference on everything from the transportation stuff to, the difference it'll make to have 12 weeks of paid family leave in this country. It's immediate. It's important, and that's why I suspect there's more than a whiff of politics about why anybody, even here in Washington, could be against it.
All right. Well, we shall see. Good luck. I hope that you succeed. Secretary Pete Buttigieg, always appreciate you. Thanks very much. Coming up, tonight's absolute worst. It's science. Science versus the right-wing freak-out machine. The black people are coming to get you. But first, the situation in Haiti just went from very bad to much worse. With the assassination of its president, Jovenel Moïse. That and more next. We'll be right back. Early this morning, gunmen assassinated Haitian President Jovenel Moïse and shot his wife at their private residence. A stunning development for a country roiled by gang violence, kidnappings, food shortages, and a surge in COVID infections. Which is all to say the situation in Haiti is dire. What bishops in that country describe as on the verge of an explosion. Now, it often feels like we're not paying enough attention to Haiti, despite our centuries-long connection to our neighbor in the Caribbean. So I'm just going to take a moment to explain how we got here. Haiti's history is a story of revolution, what historian Marlene Doe calls the first Black Lives Matter movement. Haiti was once a French colony known as Saint-Dominique. It was one of the wealthiest colonies in the French Empire. Its plantations produced coffee, sugar, and indigo at the cost of immeasurable human suffering. Its slave trade was considered one of the most brutal in the entire world. Self-liberated enslaved people revolted, leading to the Haitian Revolution, led by the great Toussaint Louverture, and then the independence of Haiti from France in 1804, making Haiti the first modern state to abolish slavery, 3 years before Great Britain did. One massive outcome, the part Republicans want scrubbed from the textbooks, is that the revolution is why the French abandoned its plan to expand in the Americas, choosing instead to sell most of the land between the Rocky Mountains and the Mississippi River to the United States government, a transaction known as the Louisiana Purchase. Haiti went on to experience tremendous internal turmoil and a toxic relationship with the West, from having to pay enormous reparations to France for overthrowing its slave owners, to a U.S. occupation that lasted 19 years. The U.S. also helped to sustain the Duvaliers, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, the dictators who ruled Haiti for nearly 30 years before priest Jean-Bertrand Aristide became the first democratically elected president in 1990. The history of dictatorship and political upheaval has now culminated in the assassination of Haiti's latest head of state. Tack on natural disasters and scarce resources that everybody's fighting over, we're now seeing a revolutionary-style society that could very well implode. Haiti has plenty of reasons to mistrust foreign intervention, but there may be a revolution on our doorstep, so let's pay attention. Joining me now is Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour and moderator of Washington Week. And, you know, I trying to set that up, Yamiche, I feel because people don't understand the close relationship we've always had to Haiti. It took us, like 19 years to even recognize them as a free country until shortly before the Civil War. And then we just have been screwing around with them for all this time. In that context, is there anything that Haitian Americans, that Haitians in that country believe we can do at this point or should do?
Well, thanks, Joy, for giving this story so much attention and for setting it up in this way. I've been talking to Haitian Americans on the ground, civil society members and members of the clergy all day. And what they really say is that Haitian people want to be heard. They want a transitional government. They want a government that isn't corrupt. They want a government that's going to be serving the actual people. Now, of course, the late President Jovenel Moïse, there are a lot of people across the country mourning the loss of him, mourning his assassination. But there are also people who remind me today, even on today, that he is someone who was accused of corruption, who was accused of acting like a dictatorship. I interviewed someone, an expert, who said this is Haiti beyond a constitutional crisis. This is a new rock bottom for Haiti. People know Haiti as a struggling poor nation, but this here, with kidnapping skyrocketing, with the president murdered in his own home, the Haitian people are saying now to the United States, listen to what we're saying. And what we're saying is that a traditional government, a government that is going to be thinking about the people and their needs, is what we need. We don't need Marines, I'm told. We don't need UN intervention. What we need is the Haitian people to have power and resources given to them to have their own destiny, that to be in power of that.
And I think we both know Jackie Charles is a phenomenal reporter at the Miami Herald, who reported some really strange details. Yeah, she's the best. Well, you and she are the best. You're equally the best. She reported some really weird details here, including what seemed like American voices being heard during the assassination. We're not sure if that was a recording or what, and a seeming attempt to make it look like the DEA was involved. Given that, the White House had to respond and say, no, the DEA was not involved in this. Are there any new details on that? And is the White House responding in any way or planning to do more than just issue that statement?
I've been talking to White House officials all day about this, including shouting a question to President Biden today. And what I'm hearing is that U.S. officials know that they need to do something. President Biden ran on this idea that he was going to be keeping promises to Haiti. And there have been a lot of Haitian Americans who are frankly disappointed because President Biden was supporting the late President Jovenel Moïse, who a lot of people said was in power past his due time and had been acting illegally. So the United States now is looking at what their solutions are. It sounds like the solutions are going to be trying to give more security investments to the national police in Haiti, trying to secure what's going on the ground there. But the United States hasn't really figured out what its strategy is, other than saying that there need to be elections this year, where Haitian Americans are saying that's simply not possible. People are too scared on the ground there. This is a real quagmire for the Biden administration. But this is a country that is just so close to the United States that there's going to have to be a solution, and the United States is going to have to be involved.
Right, because, between our policy with Cuba and our policy with Haiti, these are two countries that quickly, every crisis there becomes a migration crisis at some point. Very quickly, is there any concern that might be another element of what happens next if there's pure chaos there?
Of course. The idea that Haitians, there's something like the UNICEF said that 18,000 people in the last few months have fled their homes. People are terrified, Joy. I've been talking to people on the ground, and people can't leave their homes. People are sheltering in place right now. So there is this migration issue, but really there also is this issue of whether or not people can even survive in Haiti at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Yamiche Alcindor. Really appreciate you being here to talk about this very important issue tonight. Okay, well, up next, you're not the boss of me. You're not the boss of me. I do what I want crowd is freaking out again after President Biden suggested doing something to, keep people from dying unnecessarily of COVID. Tonight's absolute worst is straight ahead. Don't miss it. New York City held a ticker tape parade today, a time-honored tradition in the city going back more than 100 years in honor of the essential workers who guided the city through the pandemic. Stretching down Broadway's Canyon of Heroes, it was one of the biggest parades in the city's history, with 14 floats representing 260 different groups of essential workers. It was a much-needed moment of celebration for New York. But as much as we'd like it to be, the pandemic isn't over yet. Maryland announced that all of its COVID deaths in June, all of them, were unvaccinated people, every single one. It couldn't be more clear that it's a race against the clock to get enough people vaccinated to put this pandemic behind us. But over on the conservative outrage channel, good old Tuckums has come up with yet another way to pretend that we're all just overreacting.
We discovered something amazing. The data show that the median age of death for COVID is often older than life expectancy. For real. Every death is sad. But keep in mind, we just stopped Western civilization because of this virus. Do you think they hyped COVID a little bit? Yeah, they did.
Oh, Tuckums, you weird little dolly. First of all, life expectancy doesn't actually determine when a person will die. But also, your numbers are a little bit cherry-picked here from a few months in 2020. And let's talk about this concept of a median age. Tuckums is saying that half of the 600,000 Americans who died from COVID would have died soon anyway. Okay, well, even if that was a legitimate argument, which it isn't, what about the 300,000 or so Americans under that median age, Tuckums? We don't need to worry about them dying either. It's just fine that they all just died. Tucker used this sick data interpretation as a lead-in to the latest phony controversy that the right is seizing on. Listen to these remarks from President Biden talking about outreach to communities.
Now we need to go to community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, and oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors to get help to the remaining people protected from the virus.
Enter the right-wing freak-out machine, which immediately made it seem as if government officials are coming to your house to force a vaccine on you to stick you in the arm. There's Texas Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who tweeted, "How about don't knock on my door, you're not my parents." Mature. Then there's Fox and Friends host Ainsley Earnhardt, who with infuriating hypocrisy used the my body, my choice argument.
People are up in arms about this because we as Americans can make our own choices.
Thank you.
For our own families, for our own bodies.
Okay, yeah, now do abortion rights. And of course, there's the QAnon lady, Margie Green, who had to apologize a few weeks ago after she compared face masks to the Holocaust. She even visited the Holocaust Museum where she found out that the Holocaust was actually bad. But apparently she didn't learn enough to not ever bring up Nazis again, ever. In a tweet yesterday, she called door-to-door campaigners medical brown shirts, making a direct comparison to a group who helped Hitler rise to power. So tonight's absolute worst is everyone on the right who's fueling panic over President Biden's comments instead of pleading for their constituents and voters to get vaccinated so they don't die and so we can actually beat the virus. That's the show tonight.
Dateline, the true crime original. Every Friday, you'll find a mystery to be solved, a story to be told, and justice to be served. Every Friday, an all-new Dateline with a twist. The true crime original. Every Friday at 9/8 Central, only on NBC.